Hello, everyone. Yesterday saw Alexander Lukashenko re-inaugurated. He's serving his seventh consecutive term as president of Belarus. So there was a ceremony in Minsk, his capital city. Anyway, and then he had the temerity to claim that Belarus has more democracy from those who cast themselves as its models, as he said. He went on to add, half the world is dreaming about our dictatorship, the dictatorship of real business and the interests of the people. Wow, what chutzpah, such effrontery. And I remember seeing a quotation from about 10 years ago, and he's speaking in ice hockey uniform beside his confrère, Vladimir Putin. And Lukashenko is saying that we have the freest media in the world. I was bowled over by that he said it with a straight face, almost as though he believed it. Does he really believe it? I know the human capacity for self-delusion is almost illimited, but maybe that's it. This is the guy who jails journalists by the dozen. And even speaking to Steve Rosenberg, the BBC's correspondent in Moscow for decades, saying, we have free speech, but don't open your mouth too wide. So contradicting himself in the same sentence. Yeah, we have free speech, except. So many exceptions, there's no generality left, except whatever, diminishing the military glory of the Red Army, so-called rehabilitating Nazism, spreading hatred, disrespecting the president or any public official, and causing religious disharmony, insulting religious feelings. I can't think what else would be there. Extremism, this catch-all for anything which is uncongenial to him. The trouble is, people have gone down this slippery slope in the Republic of Ireland, the United Kingdom, other Western countries. Look at the United States, so much for the First Amendment. If you question the powers that be, that's extreme. Maybe it is extreme. And even if it is, you must be allowed to say it. Unless an incitement to violence, you should be allowed to say it. Highly contentious things that I would turn my stomach. I'm mortally offended every single day by leftists, but I wouldn't criminalize them. Anyway, so Lukashenko, he's held that charade of an election a few weeks ago with no real opposition. Do they even bother to count the votes, or they just make up a number with very tightly controlled media, a choreographed election? Obviously, he's got about 1,200 political prisoners in a country of only 9 million people. Thousands of other dissidents have left, have met Belarusian dissidents abroad, or people who are not particularly politically active, but the more intelligent, more educated, of more affluent people recognize what a scumbag he is, but there's nothing you can do about it. I mean, until a few years ago, he made Putin seem almost like a humanitarian by comparison. Belarus is the only country which practices the death penalty, or I should say openly. Obviously, Russia does. This doesn't bother with even a sham trial. But so that's what it's like. And Lukashenko had some of his political rivals assassinated in the 90s. I mean, his first election, I think he won fair and square, but he's the sawdust Stalin. So he's been there for, is it 31 years now? So in the Palace of Independence in Minsk, he held his ceremony, and obviously foreign diplomatic representation was thin on the ground. I remember in 2020, when he had to have that sham election, over 65,000 people were arrested. Some of them were severely beaten up by the police and so on. Some police even defected. So he's got a Nobel Prize laureate in jail, Ales Bialatsky. I hope I pronounced that correctly. There's Vyasna, a human rights movement, Vyasna as in spring. But when will liberty have its spring there? So the person who's the legitimate president of that country, Svetlana Tsikhanouskaya, she is abroad. And I'm very proud to say that she really got a political consciousness in Ireland back in the 90s when she's a teenager. There was this scheme whereby people affected by the Chernobyl fallout in southern Belarus, northern Ukraine, western Russia, they could come to the Republic of Ireland for up to 3 months in the summer, the very long summer holiday. And she perfected her English. They went with their local teachers, and they only selected model pupils. They didn't want anyone to embarrass them. They had very little money. Irish people, generous spirited Britons that we are, paid for them, took them into our houses and so forth. And so she did that, having fun time. but perfecting her English. Apparently, some of the teachers offered free Russian lessons to local people, but I mean, very people wanted to. But if these teachers from the erstwhile Soviet Union got anyone to volunteer to learn Russian, they'd get someone who was sort of academically outstanding, very enthused, very small classes, and then she's even allowed to work in a factory to earn a bit of extra money in her late teens. I believe she met Mary Robinson, who was the president at the time, the first woman we had as president in the Republic of Ireland. We've only had two female presidents, and a female head of state was really unthinkable there. And she's the first woman to contest the presidency of Belarus. And Lukashenko said, no, the public want a man. And may well be right on that one, actually. Um, yeah, so he's won that. He's got the KGB. They still use the Soviet era name there, and so the police is really not to protect the public; it's to protect the regime. Is a weapon against the public, bludgeoning them into submission. So it's very sad. It's a real control freak state, just so censorious that anyone who would question the establishment must be absolutely crushed. And hats off to Mr. Tsikhanouskay, who's Svetlana's husband. He is gallant. There he is, giving up his liberty, suffering in prison for years and years in horrific conditions. And she let put a hat in the ring for the presidency because her husband couldn't. So she's finally allowed to leave the country. Looked after the very European Union, perished in Lithuania a lot. So the Belarus, the regime is closer bound to Russia than ever before. They desperately need Russia, but even they haven't gone so far as to send troops, at least not officially, against Ukraine. Some of them volunteered for Wagner Group, Belarusians, but there are some Belarusian freedom fighters on the Ukrainian side saying Ukrainian victory is step one, and step two would be the overthrow of the Lukashenko dictatorship in Belarus. It's not a benign dictatorship either. I mean, I know there's some nostalgic socialists, but it's not as though it's egalitarian or shares the wealth. So Belarus is one of the poorest countries in Europe, and quite large in land area, all right, in natural resources, could be doing quite well. You look at countries which are less favored, like Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, and they're doing better because they're free countries. They actually have independent judiciary, the rule of law, democracy, and so on. And it's worth to invest in, and good educational policies, and not putting huge resources into oppressing the people. So diplomats from free countries didn't attend the inauguration. They wouldn't want to confer any bogus legitimacy on it by their presence. But those of China and other countries, they went along to curry favor with him. So, he tried to triangulate between the West and Russia before 2020, but now he's almost completely in hock to the Russian Federation. I wonder if Russia will fully absorb him. It's all very, very sad, and I'm so lucky to live in a free country. Less free than it was, sadly. Right, thank you so much for my channel. Make sure you subscribe on Patreon, then PayPal, georgecallahan79@gmail.com. Goodbye.